In this lesson, we'll learn how to use a viewport background image to model directly in our 3D Max scene. Now, the image we're going to be using is this aerial photo of the Museum d'Orsay, and this is the museum that we've started to model in our site model. Now, what we want to do is to keep this image as a reference so that we can easily model all of the spacing, the details, perhaps the roof slope in our actual model. Now, since we don't know what the dimensions of these objects are, we're going to bring this image into the 3D Max and use it to model from directly. So to start this process, what we can do first of all is to add a camera. It can be either V-Ray or a standard camera, and you can just more or less position the camera where you think that that photo was taken from that you're using as a reference. I'm going to move my camera up into the air, hit C on the keyboard, and then just very roughly adjust to get a departure point for that position of that camera. Next, we can go and bring in the image reference. So you can type Alt-B on your keyboard, and you can also choose to do that the long way if you like by using your drop-down menu from Views and Viewport Background as so. You can find the image by hitting Files, going to your Project Files and then Referenced Files folder. You can double click on Site Museum Reference. And here, before you click OK, just make sure that your aspect ratio is matching the bitmap so it doesn't get distorted in its proportions. You'll now see that your background image is in place. Now, all you need to do now is to match the camera angle with the one that is in your actual photo. So you can either do this with basically your finger on F3 so that you can look at it in shaded and wireframe mode, and you can start to match those lines of the model with the actual lines on the photo. I can also give you two tips at this point. Is you can also work in a mode where you select all of your objects, so let's Control A for that, and you turn everything into a ghosted version by typing Alt X. So typing Alt X will give you this semi-transparent look that you can also use when you are adjusting your model. So the main point that we're looking at here is this line, which is the ground line of our building. So we want that to match the ground line on the photo. And we also want this circle here with the half circle or the radius here to match more or less the position of that area. And then we also want to look at the actual perspective, whether we're looking from above or below, so that it is roughly matching the one in our image. So I'm going to just keep adjusting that using a few fine adjustments using the camera controls, and once we feel that we've more or less matched it, we can then start the modeling process. So I'm not going to do this with too much accuracy at this moment since I want to keep this going quite quickly, but you can match this as accurately as you feel necessary. At this point, I can also give you a tip that if you do need a lot more accuracy and you do have the time to do it, then you can use the camera matching tool, with which you will choose 5 points on your image and then match them to 5 corresponding points on your actual model that you are creating. So this will give you an opportunity to have an automatic camera created using those 5 points that you have inputted. This is something that I would use if I had to render a facade and then go and Photoshop it into the background image. We don't need the background image in our final render, so we're not going to be worried about that accuracy. So I'm just doing this by eye. So once you feel that you have correctly matched it, you just need to scale in out, and I perhaps just want to improve the look ever so slightly so that it is slightly more accurate. Then at that point you can now go and we can, let's say, delete these two towers since we're going to recreate them. We can isolate our actual building, and just to make it a little bit easier to work with, let's only extrude the front facade so we don't have the back to worry about yet. I'm going to just select that front edge, and let's just invert that selection and delete by hitting delete on our keyboards, and we now have that single segment extruded, and we can convert this down to an editable poly. If you like, you can start to apply materials, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to show you how you can now start to use your spinners or your actual screen to start modeling and moving the poly around so that you can match the actual facade of the building. If you feel that this angle is not exactly lining up with the vertical angles on your building, you can also hit H on your keyboard to select your camera, and then you can go to your camera itself. Let's just go to the actual camera and click on Guess Vertical once you have that camera selected. That will just make these vertical lines vertical as it seems to have been done in the actual photo that we're busy looking at. So if there is any still minor adjustments to make, you can make those now using the camera tool. And remember not to move this bottom line, because that line lines up with your ground surface and you don't want to move that up or down. You want to keep that one fixed, and then everything else can be edited according to the building. So let's now take the top and bottom edge, right click and click on connect, and you can start to add in all of the verticals as they appear to you by eye. Now remember, this will not be that accurate, because once you are working in perspective, a tiny change on your screen will equal quite a large change in reality, but we're just creating something that is visually similar. So I repeat that if you are looking for accuracy, it's definitely not the best way to go about the modeling process. So once we have these lines in place, we can start to create other details. For example, we can move up and create these towers. So let's select these two edges and then hold it down, shift, and pull that facade upwards. And then this is the way that we start to create the actual facade. Let me just select this edge, and I can do the same thing, scale it down. We can actually work with these two at the same time, pulling them up at the same time, and I can now hit scale, pull it in slightly, move it back until it matches my image, and if I think that's too much, I can pull it in, and I can make those fine adjustments using the spinner here at the bottom too. So by doing this process, you can basically continue and do the entire building. For example, if I wanted to show these columns, I could select those two edges, choose to connect it with X amount of segments that match the repetition that is on the actual photo, and you can see how quickly you can go and model the entire building by just using that reference image. So that is all I'm showing you in this lesson. I'm going to now in my own time continue with the building and just add a little bit more detail, creating some of the roofs, just continuing with exactly what I've shown you so far. The main thing that I wanted to show you until this point is that by using this background image, you've now started to create your entire model, and it is going to really resemble what that background photo is doing. So I'm going to continue now, and in the next lesson we're going to come back to the ground plane that we're going to model up, and we're going to also just get some of those bridges looking a little bit neater, and then a lesson after that we're going to start attacking the actual site itself by modeling up the podium properly and getting our environment ready for a quick render so that we can start to visualize some of the conceptual massing that we start to create on that platform where we're going to be building our Expo Pavilion. So exciting stuff coming up, and just keep watching so that we can quickly start chewing through these preparatory stages and getting to the actual meat of this course.